At a grey desk on the Chronicle's city floor, a small orange card arrives with a rough hand-drawn symbol and 6 ordinary words that change how one reporter walks to his car. He doesn't touch the card at first. He lets the orange sit in the pool of green lamplight, the cheap paper shining a little like a candy wrapper. A clerk has already logged the mail. Tuesday, October 27, San Francisco Chronicle. Attention, Paul Avery. Someone says the return name out loud, your secret pal. And the night people nearby smile the way people do when a joke feels off. Avery slides the card free. A cartoon skeleton watches him with pasted-on eyes. The printed greeting is friendly, almost sweet, and then the added line is not. Peekaboo, you are doomed. The ink looks recent. The edges are clean, as if the writer worked slow and careful. There's the familiar circle and cross, the little mark the city knows by now, and a number tucked like a private score. He flips it. A cross of short words waits on the back: paradise, slaves, 4 ways to end a life set around it like blunt labels: by fire, by gun, by rope, by knife. The card wants to be looked at. It wants the eyes to walk those words and then come back to the symbol again. Down the hall, phones work through their evening ring. A teletype coughs up wire copy. Avery reads the sentence again and finds that his hands have gone still. Peekaboo, you are doomed. The phrasing is almost childlike, and somehow that makes it worse. The room is ordinary: paper, coffee, dust. But the card changes the air around the desk, makes the lamp feel too warm on his wrist. He checks the envelope. The sender has built a voice out of cuteness and threat, and tonight it is speaking only to him. Hey, I'm glad you made it. Before we start, we do 3 soft checks, our little ritual. 1, breathe in, slow, like you're fogging a window. 2, loosen your jaw. 3, thumb on the table, click the quiet key. Good. This is sleepy history horror. We don't scream here, we listen. I tell true stories like a late-night walk with a friend who notices the small stuff: clocks, doors, ledgers, radio cards, the gentle proof that says what happened and when. Sometimes 2 honest things disagree, and that gap is our kind of horror. It's not jumpy, it's human. Around here, we keep house rules simple. Stay kind in the comments, stay curious with the details, and keep the volume low. If something feels heavy, we slow down. If a number won't add up, we check it together. When it finally makes sense, or refuses to, we let the paper have the last word. If you want a quiet corner online, make it this one. Hit subscribe, tell me what place we should walk next, and bring your own quiet key. Maybe it's a pen, a coin, or nothing at all. I'll start the clock, you make yourself comfortable, and we'll let the room speak first. Ready? Breathe, loosen, click. Let's begin. He lets the envelope sit where the clerk left it, a small rectangle of ordinary paper in a pool of green light. The newsroom is not quiet, but it has that late-hour rhythm. Phones clearing their throats, a wire machine coughing up another strip of type, chairs rolling and stopping, the shuffle of copy paper passed hand to hand. On the upper right of the envelope, the stamp looks fresh. The ink of the postmark is still dark, a neat half circle pressed hard. The clerk has penciled the log time in the margin, then underlined the addressee so there would be no confusion. Paul Avery, San Francisco Chronicle. The handwriting slants a little, careful and wrong all at once, the kind of hand that copies itself from a picture of handwriting. He studies the return line. It says nothing helpful. A joke, a coy phrase, the kind that would be cute if the city felt safer. The paper itself has that dime store feel, soft, a touch fuzzy along the cut. He notices the weight before he picks it up. There is a card inside, not just a letter. Someone nearby says, "More fan mail?" And someone else answers with a sound that isn't quite a laugh. That is how fear moves in rooms like this, through little sounds, through the way people don't look too long at the same thing. He picks it up at last. The flap has been glued with care. The edge is straight, not chewed. He turns it to the desk and slides a letter knife under the seam, working slow so he won't tear. The blade makes a soft paper sound, a small zipper of a noise that feels too loud under the lamp. When the envelope opens, he pauses again, as if the breath of the thing might come out first. Nothing does. Only paper and the faint, cheap smell of ink. He tips the contents into his palm. An orange greeting card drops out, bright as a candy wrapper under the green light. The front image looks like something from a drugstore rack in late October, a cartoon skeleton, a grin too big for its face. At first glance it's harmless. At second glance it isn't. He sees paste-on eyes, little discs that shouldn't be there, fixed in a way that makes the whole face feel like it is staring at him and not at anyone else. The printed words are the expected little holiday greeting. The added line is not. He doesn't read it yet. He looks instead at the envelope again, at his name, where the writer put it. The letters are shaped carefully, as if the hand wanted to be a certain kind of hand, and practiced until it could. There is a small, stubborn error in it, the kind of misspelling that could be a joke, or could be a thumbprint of a person trying to sound like someone else. He lets the detail register and sets the envelope down, a small white shape, now gone quiet on the blotter. Around him the room keeps doing its work. A sports editor calls for a box score. A city desk man swears at a ringing line. Copy boys pass with folded proofs that smell like hot ink. The normal sound is what makes the orange card feel abnormal. It doesn't fit the hum. It sits there, bright and simple, like a hazard flag in a calm sea. He opens the card. The art is childish. The mood is not. He reads the added words and feels the room tilt a degree, not enough for anyone else to notice, enough for him to steady his hand on the edge of the desk. The card is a performance, and he is its first audience tonight. He looks once more at the circle and cross mark the city knows too well, and for a long breath he does not think about the headline this might make. He thinks about hallways and parking lots, and the walk to his car after the lights go off. He has written about the symbol for more than a year now, a circle with a cross laid through it, like a sight taken from a gun or a surveyor's mark stamped over a map. In print, the figure looks simple, almost plain. In his head, it carries a weight larger than lines can hold. The newsroom learned the shape the way a city learns a weather pattern, by repetition, by the air changing when it appears. It has arrived on envelopes, on letters with columns of neat block script, on pages that carried puzzles no one could leave alone. It has arrived with claims. It has arrived with the kind of timing that makes editors stand up from their chairs. There were the early notes or clipped confidence in theatre. There were ciphers, rows of symbols like a language that never had a country, a dare in every line. He remembers the afternoon one of those codes gave way and the room felt a private shock. You could solve a thing and still not have the man. The symbol did not explain itself. It did not need to. It worked like a brand burned into the city's attention, no signature needed, and yet there it was. He has learned to write calmly around it, to give readers what they need, and nothing that would help whoever sits behind the mark. Names where names are already public, places where places are already known, the rest held back until it can bear the light. The paper has argued this point across long, dry meetings, how much to print, how much to fold. He has sat in those talks with a pencil and a coffee gone cold, thinking not about the policy, but about the way the symbol finds its way into ordinary people's kitchens, on TV at dinner, on the front page in the morning, over coffee, over toast. He knows the other rooms too, police floors with their varnished doors, a map that lives on a wall with pushpins like small wounds, the slow cross-current between departments that makes information creep instead of run. Every time the symbol shows up, the calls begin. A tip, a threat, a claim of credit for old harm no one can prove. The phone lines carry fear in different voices, steady, shaky, laughing too hard, whispering too soft, and he has learned to tell when the voice wants to help and when it wants to be close to the heat. Tonight, though, the mark is not on a broadside letter. It is on an orange card meant for small jokes, the kind a drugstore rack sells by the handful in late October. The dissonance is the point. The sender knows the city's autumn and presses a finger right on it. A holiday, a grin, a child's game, peekaboo, and then the symbol like a stamp on the back of the smile. The work of the newsroom is often to pour sense over mess. The card refuses the pour. It wants to be both things at once, childish and practiced, cheap and deliberate, light and heavy. He thinks of the little buttons someone made last month, black words on white plastic passed around a desk as a joke, until the joke felt less like a laugh than a talisman. He thinks of the way a colleague checks the dark window for his reflection before he walks to the elevator, as if a pane of glass could warn him. He thinks of the letter openers in a coffee tin on the copy desk, each blade nicked and dull from ordinary mail, and how his hand shook a little anyway when the metal met the envelope. The symbol teaches habits. It makes people count doors. It makes a man look up from his typewriter when an elevator bell rings. It sits on a card like a small, tidy storm, and it does what storms do. It changes the pressure, and everyone in the front tries to be cute first. A cartoon skeleton, limbs drawn with that cheerful wobble drugstore cards used to make death feel like party decor, stands against a flat field of orange. Its grin is too even, the teeth like a picket fence with nothing behind it. The bones are tidy and clean, no shadow, no depth. They want to be funny. But someone has added eyes, little pasted circles that don't match the print. They sit slightly off, as if the skull has been forced to look at a single person and not at the world. That small mismatch pulls the image out of the rack and onto the desk. It feels homemade in a way that has nothing to do with warmth. Lettering curls around a figure in the polite tone of seasonal greetings. It means to wish a good time, to send a wink across a hallway, to let October be playful. Then the extra line arrives under it, a short sentence written by a hand that practices neatness. He reads those words once, then again, because they use a child's game to tilt the floorboards under his chair, peek, cover, reveal. Only the reveal is a doom delivered as if it were a punchline. The ink sits slightly raised, drying glossy where the pen pressed hard. Whoever wrote this wanted each letter to hold its shape. The force shows. He traces the edges with his eyes. The corners of the card are round, unthreatening, the way manufactured friendliness is. The skeleton's pose is almost a dance step, one heel lifted as if the figure will shuffle left and let laughter move past it. The pasted eyes ruin the move. They make the figure stand still, set to a stare. He thinks about how a small change, 2 circles of paper, a smudge of paste, can shift tone the way a wrong note shifts a song. It is not a violent change. It is worse for its lightness. From your secret pal, the print offers, the way office pranksters sign a cupcake or a balloon. He hears a chair roll 2 bays over, hears the soft knock of a drawer shutting. The newsroom is a plain machine, but sound has begun to arrange itself around the card, as if the things in the room have learned to step carefully. He feels the urge to look over his shoulder and doesn't. The sentence on the front has already done that for him. It looks over his shoulder for him. It tells him how the hallway will sound later, how the stairwell will echo. He lets his finger rest on the card without pushing it. The gloss has cooled to the room's temperature. He considers the distance between joke and threat, how a single step can bridge it when a person means to. The sender wants that step to be the whole walk. He can see the craft of it, the way store-bought cheer is a cover and the handwriting is the performance. The front of the card is a stage built from cheap ink and a borrowed skeleton. The actor is the line that doesn't belong. He thinks of headlines that wore humour like a coat to keep warm. Ghoul strikes again. Holiday horror, the kind of puns newsrooms use when a clock is loud and space must be filled. He will not write like that tonight. The front of the card is not a joke, it is a held breath. He reads the added sentence a third time, slower, testing the weight of each ordinary word. They balance perfectly, like a stack of coins waiting for the table to shake. He sets the card down on the blotter and realizes the room has gotten brighter without the lamps changing. No, he has simply opened his eyes wider. He is looking for motion at the edge of the frame, the way one does when a mask has decided it no longer wants to be a costume. He turns the card and feels the shift a room makes when a door opens somewhere behind you. The back is not playful, it's plain stock, same orange field, but the center is ruled by a cross. Not a church cross, not exactly. Two black lines meet at right angles, clean and straight, as if held with a ruler. The four arms make four small squares, and into those squares the writer has placed a single word each, printed in tidy block letters that try to look like a machine. Paradis at the top, slaves at the bottom, the spelling stiff and wrong, in a way that insists on itself. He reads the words aloud once, but only in his head. The shape tells him to. It invites eyes to go around the compass, up, down, left, right, and come back to the center. He does what the design wants because that is what designs do to people. They give a path, and the mind walks it. Around the cross, along the edges, four phrases sit like labels in a museum. By fire, by gun, by rope, by knife. They are as flat as inventory, four ways to end breath turned into a list with bullet points implied by the neatness of the type. There is no flourish, no smear, no rush. Whoever set these words down did it like a careful clerk making a ledger. He traces the strokes. The hand presses harder on the downstrokes, lighter on the lifts. The ink has the faint shine of something written within the hour. He thinks of the envelope's clean flap, the careful glue line, the practiced misspelling, and sees in the back of the card the same steady hand. A person who knows that precision can be more frightening than mess. He studies the spacing. The cross is centered almost perfectly. The letters sit square in their little rooms. Only one thing is off. The word at the top, paradise, takes that small sidestep from correct spelling and plants it like a flag. He has seen the error before. It is not a slip of haste. It is a choice, a way to make the word belong to the sender instead of to a dictionary. He writes notes like this in his head, not mistake, habit, not accident, signature. The back gives nothing soft to look at, no cartoon, no kind face, only the scheme. He is aware of his own breathing now, the gentle pull and push that the body does without permission. In that simple rhythm, the four methods ring a quiet bell: fire, gun, rope, knife. They are so ordinary as objects that a hardware store could stock 3 of the 4. That is part of the harm. It says, I do not need anything special. I only need time and reach. He sets the card down and takes it up again, as if the angle might change what it is. It does not. The cross holds. The words hold. He tries to feel nothing and only record the way he has trained himself to do on police floors and at scenes where a single shoe sits in the wrong place. But the back of the card refuses to be just a record. It is an argument made in kid-simple lines. Life is a tally. The center is mine. The corners are yours. He looks beyond the lines for a clue, a bump in the ink, a hesitation, the tilt that betrays right hand or left. He can almost hear the pen lift and land, the sure metronome of a writer who enjoys the act of writing as much as the message. That is the part that chills him more than the words. Joy will carry a person a long way. A phone rings on the city desk and someone answers with his name. He doesn't turn. The back of the card has tied a knot in the air, and he wants to learn its exact shape before the room pulls it apart. Later, the paper will photograph this, front and back, edges square, and readers will scan it over breakfast, tracing the same cross with jam-sticky fingers, maybe smiling at the skeleton before they turn the page. He knows that, and still he cannot make this feel like paper. It feels like a hand on a doorknob that has just started to turn. He almost misses it the first pass. The card is busy in its plain way, orange field, pasted eyes, cross, the tidy words, and tucked near the familiar circle, with cross is a smaller sign, almost dainty compared to the rest, a number set down like a private note in a ledger. He has seen numbers before in these communications, claims that step ahead of what anyone can prove, arithmetic that wants to become fact by being written bravely. This one sits close to the symbol as if it belongs there the way a date belongs under a signature. He lets his eyes rest on it without blinking. Not a sentence, not a boast spelled out, just the spare, smug efficiency of 2 digits. 14. He doesn't say it out loud, he hears it anyway, the way a person hears the name at the far end of a crowded room and knows it's theirs. 14 what? 14 who? The newsroom has a list that is shorter than the claims, and that gap has been the winter wind in every conversation for a year. How much is known, how much is said, how much is theatre? He thinks of the map with pushpins, the one that lives on a police wall like a patient that refuses to get better. He thinks of dates his pencil has memorized and names his notes return to like a prayer, and also of the way rumour likes to braid itself into a rope and throw itself over the nearest fern beam. Numbers are handy rope. They let fear count out loud. They let the mind skip ahead. 14 is not a detail, it is a direction. He pictures the person writing it. Slow, careful, the pen pressing harder on the downstroke of the second digit, as if to anchor the claim. There is a pleasure in tight handwriting, in making small things crisp. He can feel that pleasure on the card, can feel the small pride of neatness. The number does not arrive breathless, it arrives prepared, hair combed, shoes polished, ready for the morning edition that will carry it, ready for kitchen tables where coffee will go cold while people stare and do the same arithmetic with their own lives. He is not a detective, though he knows the habit of one, stacking what's certain, setting aside what is not. The certain things could fit on a single page if you made the type too small. The uncertain things need a filing cabinet and a mop. A number like this lands right in the middle. Officially, it is nothing. Emotionally, it is loud. It bends the air around it, invites every earlier headline to line up behind it, like school children called by roll. He writes the digits in his notebook anyway and draws a box around them, a fence, a reminder to check, to ask, to not let the boldness of ink outrun the cooler pace of fact. Still he understands the trick. Numbers make a story feel finished. They give the illusion of a sum. 14 suggests a total that is tidy enough to sleep on and terrible enough to stay awake with. It is a bedtime horror and a breakfast statistic at once. Around him the room keeps its rhythm, a laugh that doesn't land, a stapler thumped twice, the soft clatter of copy dropped on a steel cart. The small, ordinary counts go on, pages, inches, minutes, and the number on the card sets itself apart like a metronome that refuses the song. He closes the card and opens it again, checking the digits as if they could move. They do not move. That is their power. They sit, fixed and simple, and make everything around them feel less so. He sets the card aside and brings the envelope back into the lamp's circle, like a witness recalled to the stand. The name is there in careful letters, each one upright and separated as if drafted Paul, then the last name where the hand makes its choice, Avery. That small extra stroke has moved the sound of him sideways. Avery. He hears it in his head the way a substitute teacher hears a room for the first time and gets a name wrong and waits for the laugh. No one laughs here. The error sits like a chip in a windshield. Small, but it pulls the eye again and again. He has seen this misspelling before, not as a rush mistake, but as a habit the writer refuses to correct, as if the wrong version has become the private version, the one the sender owns in his mouth. In another life, such a detail would be a kindness, proof the writer actually knows him well enough to mangle him with affection. In this life, it's a thumbprint pressed flat on paper, a single letter that tells a story about attention and performance. He wonders whether the hand wrote it with a grin, picturing the newsroom catching it, circling it, arguing over what it means. Meanings multiply easily. The practical minds say a simple error, a near neighbor on the keyboard of the brain. The paranoid minds say a test, a hint, a back road into figuring out who this person reads, where he works, what he hears other people say. He has learned to walk between those minds without adopting either one. Reporters survive by not falling in love with any single explanation. He lets the misspelling be both things, accident and emblem, clumsiness and costume. He traces the line weight with his eyes. The hand that wrote the letters presses hard at the end of strokes, then lifts neat, no scratch, no tail. There's a patience in it, the leisurely control of someone unafraid of being watched by himself. He can almost see the posture behind the pen, elbow close, wrist steady, a desk cleared for the ritual. That is what this is finally, ritual. The wrong letter isn't just wrong, it is repeated wrong, claimed wrong, worn like a lapel pin. He thinks of all the wrong names people wear in a city, nicknames that stuck, badges misprinted and never fixed, bills that keep arriving addressed to a ghost who lived in the apartment before you. A wrong name can be a drag you learn to live with, or it can be a tool you use when you want to feel uncatchable. He writes down both possibilities in the margin of his notebook and draws a small circle beside each, a private voting system that he will ignore later when the day editors ask what it suggests. The envelope's other marks don't help much. The street is correct. The paper's name is clean. The stamp sits square, not crooked, which he dislikes more than he expects. Sloppiness would be friendly. It would mean hurry, a pulse. This has none. Even the wrong letter is tidy, upright, almost prim. He thinks of the man who used to sit 2 rows over handing out those buttons. White circle, black words, I am not Avery. A joke then, a charm you pinned on your lapel, because charms feel safer than locks. He pictures one that says, I am Avery, and does not smile. A misspelling turns out to be good at its job. It hogs attention. It keeps the mind looping the simplest path, while the rest of the message does its heavier work. He forces himself to look away from the name and back to the whole shape of the thing. Envelope, flap, glue line, stamp, cancel, fibers that caught a stray hair he will later note and pass on. He will let the police floors decide whether the wrong letter is a breadcrumb or a boast. His part is smaller and colder. To note, to fix nothing, to carry the error forward, so the city sees it exactly as it was, off by a single line. He places the envelope gently beside the card, parallel edges aligned, as if straightness could persuade the knight to behave. The name, right and wrong at once, continues to glow in the lamplight, a tiny misdirection with a long shadow. He breathes, smooth and slow, and reminds himself that the paper teaches order, even when the world refuses it. Then he turns the card over again, because despite everything, the misspelling is only the doorbell. The house is the message inside. A newsroom learns to wear danger like a sweater, itchy, familiar, tugged at the cuffs when the air turns. It does not scream. It adjusts. The first adjustments are jokes, because jokes are quick and don't need a meeting. Someone brings a sheet of peel and stick circles from the print shop, white as paper plates, and stamps each one with black block type. I am not Avery. The buttons pass hand to hand with the easy economy of cigarettes. No price, just a nod and a palm. Reporters pin them to lapels, then to lampshades, then to corkboards above phones where tip lines ring and ring. The joke says we see the shape of fear and will draw a smiley face on it before it eats the room. He takes one. He does not put it on. He folds the pin shut and slides it into his top drawer, where paper clips live in a clean ashtray and a spare ribbon waits coiled like a sleepy snake. It feels wrong to wear a name joke, while his own name sits wrong by one letter in the lamplight. Still, he understands the charm logic. He has seen men who don't believe in luck pat their coat pocket twice before walking into court. He has watched copy editors arrange their pencils by length at the start of a shift, because order in small piles suggests order in large things. The button is the same prayer, spoken with a grin. Other adjustments follow. The night watchman does his rounds a notch sooner than usual and lingers at the glass doors that face the street. The elevator operator, on nights the operator is a real person and not just the cranky box itself, keeps the car at the lobby longer between runs, as if idling were a kind of guard. Desks that used to spill across the aisles straighten into neat islands. Personal mess shrinks as if clutter could attract attention. Someone tapes a sheet of carbon paper over the clock on the back wall, so it looks dimmer from the editorial bay. No one says why, and no one takes it down. Phones become characters. A ring on the police desk sounds different from a ring on features, and tonight, both rings carry an extra ounce. People answer on the first chirp, breathe, say their names slower. When calls come that are nothing, switchboard errors, a reader drunk on grievance, a kid with a dare in his voice. The relief tastes like guilt. When calls come that are something, steady, frightened, a detail a person could not have gleaned from breakfast TV, the room tightens without moving, a held breath shared by strangers. He notices how footsteps change. In ordinary hours, a newsroom's floor plays a clatter of wheels and heels, a ricochet of chair legs and jokes. After a letter like this, feet place themselves down with care, as if scuffing could wake whatever sleeps under the desks. Laughter moves closer to the chest. Swears drop in volume, but multiply. A coffee pot that used to burn to bitterness by midnight now empties twice as fast. Hands want a task, any task, even the ritual of pouring and stirring and setting the spoon on the saucer just so. He thinks of the old hands who taught him to keep a clean notebook, to write dates in the corner as if a future self might come back hungry for them. They had a rule for grief and threat both. Describe, don't perform. The city will perform for you. Put the verbs in the right order and let the reader do the fearing. He tries to hold that rule like a rail. The card on his blotter wants performance. The The room around him refuses it with small, stubborn routines. Someone unrolls a city map on the center table and sets coffee cups on the corners to keep the curl down. No one says why the map is needed. It is simply a prop that reassures. Lines cross lines. Neighborhoods present themselves as honest squares. You can't pin dread to a grid and call it solved, but the gesture keeps hands busy. Nearby, the copy chief sharpens pencils to equal points, 3 at a time, little twigs prepared for sentences that will refuse to be light. He watches a young reporter, new, eager, face still sunburned from some day story on a wharf, lean toward the card and then lean away like a swimmer testing temperature with toes. "That it?" the kid asks, voice soft enough to be kind. He nods. The kid nods back and returns to his desk, where an untouched sandwich waits under wax paper. The newsroom continues to absorb the threat in manageable bites. A button, a map, a softer laugh, a second pot of coffee. Outside, October presses its nose to the glass. Inside, the lamp burns one desk into a tiny, bright stage, and he writes the next small, careful line. Down the hill from the paper, the police floors keep late hours of their own. Hallways smell of pencil shavings and damp wool. Doors wear small plates with numbers. Coffee tastes like it was boiled in a radiator. In rooms like these, certainty travels with an escort. A thing is not real until it has a tag, a chain, a signature, a second set of eyes. By late 1970, those rooms hold more than one file on the symbol that keeps showing up in the mail. The stack is not tidy, but it is careful. At least 5 killings live in it with some shared grammar, notes, calls, car doors left at odd angles, a pattern people argue about because pattern is the only comfort available. The letters are their own species of evidence. They arrive already talking, already trying to direct the conversation. The inspectors, men with pockets that jingle when they stand, men who keep their tempers by putting them in drawers, treat paper like it can lie and like it can't. Authenticity is a checklist, and the list grows longer with each delivery. They look at postmarks, not just the city and date, but the faint scoring on the ink where the cancel wheel bit down. They hold envelopes to the light and study the watermark in the paper stock. They photograph the glue line on the flap in case the squeeze left a pattern. They dust and lift and tape, then label the tape, then label the label. They keep the stamps in tiny sleeves because a thumb is a universe and a case is lost in universes. Handwriting is its own battery of tests: pressure, slant, how the lowercase r behaves when it has a neighbor, how the sender dots an I when he's tired. Examiners talk about letter forms the way tailors talk about seams, where the wrist relaxes, where it tightens, the signature of lift and land that gives a body away. The men in plain ties know they are being watched from the other side of the glass. The letters show an awareness of being graded. The neatness is not for kindness. It is part of the performance. Sometimes the paper carries something heavier than ink. A torn scrap of cloth, the kind that a city recognizes before any official speaks, turns a page into a courtroom. No boast can counterfeit the weave of a shirt. The room goes quiet on nights like that. Even jokes forget themselves. A scrap means the letter is not just theatre. It has brought its own proof to the stage. Still, theatre is the point. The timing says so: holidays, news cycles, the hours when a morning edition can still be bent. The writer understands audience and balcony, understands how a city listens when a newspaper acts as microphone. The mail is both prop and script. It tells the police where to look and then tells the city where the police are looking. The departments bristle at that. They were trained to hunt in silence. But a letter like tonight's doesn't want silence. It wants chorus. He has sat across from the inspectors often enough to know their two voices, the public caution and the private weather report. Publicly they say what can be said without gifting the writer any pleasure. Privately they mutter about edges that don't fit, about witnesses who remember light but not faces, about maps that make liars of straight lines. They respect paper because paper outlives them. If a thing is written down, it keeps testifying long after the room has emptied of coats. He thinks of the way evidence moves, sealed, initialed, carried in a hand that does not swing. Even a greeting card gets that solemn little parade. The contrast would be funny if it weren't the whole case, a drugstore skeleton under a banker's lamp, then inside a plastic sleeve with a property number and an oath. Proof and theatre, braided so tight you can't say where one stops. The sender counts on that braid. He plays to both rooms at once, the one with fluorescent lights and forms, and the one with breakfast tables and folded pages. Tonight's orange rectangle sits precisely between them, grinning on the front, ruled like a ledger on the back, a small stage that insists on being evidence and applause cue in the same breath. He has covered parades and knows the trick of a holiday. It supplies its own spotlight. You can whisper on any other Tuesday and the room might not turn its head. Whisper on a week with pumpkins in windows and the whisper carries. The orange card isn't just stationery, it's a cue taken from the calendar. The sender borrows the costume rack of October, skeletons, candy, children's games, and wears it like a pass that gets him past the velvet rope of attention. Peekaboo is not only a phrase, it is blocking, hide, reveal. Force the audience to participate by looking where you tell them to look. The mark on the card has never been only identification. It's a logo with a job. He thinks of it as a stage light on a swivel. Wherever the circle and cross falls, the city's gaze follows. Place it on a cipher, and the mark says, "Watch me think." Place it on an envelope, and it says, "Watch me arrive." Place it on a drugstore greeting card, and it says, "Watch me turn your safe objects into props." The lines are so simple that a child could draw them, which is part of the craft. Simple shapes fit anywhere. They pass through scanners in the mind without slowing. Holidays offer cover. A card in late October can ride a mail bin without raising a clerk's eyebrow. A skeleton at the top of a stack does not look like a threat when the whole rack beside it grins. Even the pasted googly eyes wear a kind of plausible deniability. A child could have done it, a co-worker could have done it, anybody could have done it. Ambiguity is the cheapest smoke machine. It fills the room fast. He thinks about comedic timing the way old columnists used to, set up, turn, punch, and realizes the card runs that script with a low, steady voice. Set up, the friendly front from your secret pal. Turn, the sentence that swaps sugar for iron. Punch, the back, where the cross and the four methods sit like a straight-faced finale. The act is deadpan. The absence of flourish is the flourish. It lets the audience supply the gasp, which is more durable than any exclamation point a writer could add. The season helps with distribution too. Newsrooms write more features in October, costumes, safety tips, a haunted theatre held together by draft and memory. A threatening card surfacing now will not only make a story, it will make a theme. It can latch on to the city's talk and ride it like a barge. The sender knows this. He is programming against the schedule, dropping his act when the city has already pre-warmed the seats. He considers the way the card repurposes childishness. On a sidewalk tonight, kids will practice the rhythm of doorbell and chorus, trick or treat, their parents, half a step behind, with a flashlight and a folded bag. The message steals that rhythm and returns it sour. Peek, a glance, a hand over the eyes. Boo, the reveal. Only here the hands do not move away. The stare remains, pasted on, unblinking. The game stops being a game when one player refuses to laugh, marks a contract. A signature promises I am who I say I am. A logo promises you will get what you got last time. The circle and cross does both. It tells the paper and the police, this is part of the same act. Seat yourselves. It tells the public, you know my silhouette, feel the old chill. Contracts need renewal to stay alive. That is what timing does. It refreshes the agreement in the eyes of the crowd. He writes a note to himself, holiday, as amplifier, and underlines it once. That's the lesson buried in the orange. Keep the set familiar, change one prop, arrive on the right night. Theatre lives or dies on cues. Tonight, every window carries a cutout of a smiling moon or a black cat, and amid those friendly shapes arrives a different circle cut by a cross. The audience was already seated. The house lights were already dim. The mark only had to step through the curtain and speak in a voice the city recognized at once. He leaves later than he says he will. Papers stack themselves when the mind hesitates, and by the time he stands, the newsroom has thinned to the kind of crew that knows each other's footfalls. He slides the card into a large envelope with a slip that says where it came from and who touched it, then hands it to a night editor who signs with a firm block print and a slow nod. That done, there is nothing noble left to do but go home. He shrugs on his coat, checks his pockets by habit, keys, notebook, coins, and looks once at the green lamp before he clicks it off. The desk disappears the way a stage disappears when someone pulls a chain on a single bare bulb. The hallway out of the city room runs past a bank of dark windows that mirror the ceiling lights. In the glass, he is a figure in a coat, moving. He does not watch himself. He watches the inside of the elevator as the doors open, the bright floor number, the metal rails, the smear of a palm near the button marked L. He rides with a copy boy who holds a bundle of papers like firewood. The boy nods and does not speak. The elevator keeps its own steady breath, cables doing their quiet work behind the wall. He listens for anything sudden, anything that does not belong, and hears only the clink when the car settles at the lobby, the soft scrape of the gate. The night watchman signs him out with a felt tip marker and says his name the way a man says a password he invented himself. Outside, Market Street has pulled into a light sleep. Buses cough. A far siren tries to sound bored. He crosses with the long leg of the light and picks a route he has not picked in months, not because he believes in fresh paths, but because changing a line on a map makes the mind feel useful. He keeps to the edges where window light spills. He lets the dark hold its corners without volunteering to tour them. Parking lots are the same everywhere at this hour. A mixing smell of oil and dust, a chorus of metal cooling, the sound of one shoe, scuff far away that turns out to be a leaf. He walks the centre of the lane, keys in hand, not as a weapon, but as proof that a door opens at the end of this. The number on the card rides along in his head, silent, as if it has taken a seat in the back and is waiting to be dropped somewhere that is not his street. He does not speak to it. He listens instead for the simple noises he wants, the click of his own lock, the sigh the rubber seal makes when a car door lets go of itself. He checks under the driver's seat because he always has. He checks the back seat because people tell other people to. He starts the car and waits a moment before shifting, as if the engine might tell him something. It does not. It warms. He pulls out with the care of a man who respects small angles. At the exit, he looks both ways longer than the sign expects and makes the turn that puts him on a street with more windows. The city keeps him company with lit rooms where other late people do ordinary things, wash a cup, fold a shirt, stand reading at a counter, unaware they are acting as nightlights for a stranger in a moving box of glass and steel. At a red light, he checks his mirror and surprises himself by meeting his own eyes. They look like any man's eyes at this hour, ringed by work, a little flat, clear enough. He blinks and the light turns and he goes. The walk to the car has taken nothing from him that he can measure, and yet he feels lighter leaving the lot than he did entering it. The way a patient feels after a doctor says the word routine, even when nothing about the body feels simple. He drives the speed limit and does not signal early or late. He aims to be the kind of car that becomes background. Tonight, anonymity feels like a talent, and he is trying to remember how to do it well. He did not hear the elevator bell inside the car. He hears it now from memory, thin and a little sad. Small sounds have learned to wear new clothes. A bell becomes a test. A door thump in the hall becomes a footfall you measure by weight. He studies the street the way a driver studies weather through a windshield, steady, patient, not looking for drama, just for the change in the normal pattern that means more wind than the trees are willing to admit. The normal pattern holds. A taxi noses out from a stand and decides against it. A woman with a scarf crosses against the light, her shoes making that practical 2-note on the crosswalk paint. He and the city take each other's temperature without saying so. At a corner store he has counted on since younger days, a clerk sweeps the doorway while a radio talks quietly about the Giants and how next year will be different. He considers stopping for milk, then does not, because breaking the small plan feels like telling on himself. He will buy milk tomorrow, in a bright afternoon, when it is boring to do so. He keeps rolling. He does not tail a bus, does not let a bus tail him, does not test the choreography of anyone else's route. He chooses the right lane because his exit is soon, and because the right lane offers fewer surprises. Glass teaches more than darkness does. He watches windows he passes, restaurant fronts, laundromats now closed, the long, unblinking panes of an office with all the desks empty and all the chairs patient. Reflection is a cheap guard, and he still uses it. Car doors show what they can. A plate glass corner shows what it wants. He looks and then lets the eyes slide away, so the looking never looks like staring. He does not want to be the kind of man who hunts shadows. He will collect shadows if they present themselves. That is different. He breaks for a yellow light earlier than he might have last week and sits through the red with both hands resting on the wheel, fingers open, elbows easy. He knows body language too. A car is a posture people read. He leaves the space of a bumper in front of him and enough to the curb so that if a door opens, it will not surprise him. He sees a man on the median, a face that could be any face, a coat that could be any coat, and thinks nothing he can take notes on. Thinking nothing is also a task. When green returns, he rolls it like a note held on a horn and makes his exit. The ramp gives a view of roofs and a wet slice of the bay. He exhales without planning to and fills his lungs again the way a swimmer resets. The neighborhood near his building is not fancy, but it is steady. The same bar with the same pretzel jar, the same hardware store that locks its ladder with a chain like a bicycle. He turns where he always turns and then turns once more, not where he always does, just to be sure he is choosing and not following the ghost of habit. He finds a spot one house farther than he likes and takes it so he will not circle and look like a car that circles. He turns the wheel until the tires speak a soft syllable to the curb and the car sits true. He kills the engine and lets the heat tick down in the block. He reaches to the passenger seat for his notebook and lets his hand rest there, not grabbing, just feeling the shape of the useful object he carries everywhere. Street glass supervises. The elevator bell in his head fades. He listens to the city's bigger noise, the wide breath of it. and decides that for now he belongs to it the way a single lit window belongs to a block. Small, ordinary, one square among many. Home is a narrow stair and a door that sticks when the air is wet. He likes that about it. A door that resists is a door that reports. He fits the key, steps in, and stands without turning on the light for a count of 5, letting the night settle around the room as if it needs to remember where the chair is and where the small table is and where the teacup sits. Then he snaps a lamp at the far end, the way you light a stage from upstage first. The room pulls itself into view, books not quite squared, a coat over the back of a chair, a postcard from a friend who travels deserts for stories. He closes the door with the care that keeps the latch from shouting, then locks it and sets the chain. The little run of metals sounds like someone clearing a throat. He walks the circuit he has taught himself. Window latches first, thumb, lift, test, down. He looks out not to search but to mark. The street has parked and quieted. A distant TV throws blue through a curtain. A cat moves along a fence with the smooth economy of a thing sure of its body. He breathes with the room once and continues. The phone sits where it always sits. He lifts the receiver and listens to the empty line for a second, because silence has a quality, and he has learned its small flavors. He sets it down. The refrigerator hums. The radiator gives a hollow ping as if something small has struck it with a spoon. These are acceptable noises, noises that can sign their names. Public fear lives in headlines and meetings and buttons with jokes on them. Private fear lives in the space between the lamp and the chair. He does not dramatize it. He inventories it. He writes in the notebook, windows checked, door locked, chain set, no unusual sounds. He does it because writing a thing down turns feelings into things with edges. He changes shirts and sets his tie over the back of the chair and rolls his sleeves, then puts water on in the small kitchen and stands while it considers boiling. He lets the kettle sing one quiet bar and then lifts it, because neighbors should not be made to listen to anyone's brass. He does not sit with the card. That is out of his hands now, wrapped and tagged and moving in someone else's chain of custody. He sits instead with the echo of it, which is a thinner object and more invasive. The phrase from the front has learned to pace. He lets it do that. He does not try to stop it. He stirs tea and eats a small piece of bread with butter, because eating resets a person to the facts of being alive. It is hard to be frightened while chewing. He chews. The phone does ring once, late, a friend from the paper on a break, voice pitched low out of respect for sleeping walls. They talk about ordinary things first, copy length, a quote that won't fit, whether the new proofreader is as sharp as he seems, and then the friend asks, "You good?" He answers in the plainest words he owns. "I'm fine." It is not a lie. Fine is not a lake. It is a foot placed where a foot can go. They say good night, and the line clicks with that small civic click city phones have, a click that sounds like a building breathing out. He leaves the lamp on while he showers. He leaves the lamp on while he dries his hands. Then he turns it off, and the room does not feel like a trap. It feels like a room. He sleeps dressed enough to answer a knock. He sleeps with the window open a finger, so the night can tell him what it planned. Private routine saves him from public fear. Public fear explains why the routine matters. Between them, he finds the softer middle, where a man closes his eyes and trusts the radiator to sing only from heat. Sleep drifts in the way fog does, soft, patient, unwilling to be impressed. He wakes once to the small creak of the building settling its bones, and once to the distant siren that chooses another street. At 4, he gets up without swearing, and crosses the floor in his socks to the little radio on the bookshelf. He keeps it for baseball and for storms. Tonight he uses it for the ordinary hum of the city, the overnight call-ins, the weatherman who speaks like he is trying not to wake anyone, the soft burr of a station that never quite got its antennae perfect. He turns the volume until it is more felt than heard. The room gains a faint companion. He sets the police scanner beside it, a box he pretends not to care for. The scanner is a temptation he tries to treat like a tool. He slides the dial through air and listens to channels he knows by the shape of their voices. Dispatch, steady and clipped. Patrol cars with the rhythm of pairs who have worked together long enough to speak in half words. He hears nothing that belongs to him. He is relieved. He is shamed by the relief. He is not important to the scanner's universe, and that is as it should be. Over the radio, a caller tells a host about a dream that decided to be a story. The host says the words a good host says. Go on. I hear you. And then what? And the caller unspools something about a light outside the window that turned out to be the moon. He smiles, not unkindly. Fear is a poor editor. It leaves everything in. The city is full of people auditioning their worries for a stranger who will keep them company as the clock buckles past 4. He thinks of how many voices share this hour and how few names. He pours water and sits on the edge of the bed and lets the radio locate him. Geography is not only streets, it is signals too, and the ways they comb a place for ears. The scanner pops once with the sharp, matter-of-fact note of an arrest. The words are code numbers and cross streets and a tone of calm that makes calm a choice. He respects that. He notes it. He turns the scanner down and the radio up one notch, and a song from years ago finds him like a coin under a couch finds a hand. The singer has a tired kindness in his throat. The lyric has nothing to do with anything and everything to do with being awake. If the card was written to rattle glass, the night remains a house that refuses the draft. He cannot keep the city safe. He can keep his little square of it neat. He folds a shirt. He moves a book from the floor to the table. He places his keys where his hand will meet them without thinking. He writes a line in the notebook. Awake at 4, radio, nothing on scanner for me. He draws a small square beside it and darkens the square in with his pencil until the paper shines. A box coloured in is a stop thought. It feels good to stop a thought. Dawn begins too early to be useful, a pale smudge behind rooftops that promises rain and decides to withhold it. He lies back and closes his eyes and hears the radio host thank a caller named Mary for the story about the moon. Sleep well, the host says, and the city does not, but it tries. He does too. The night folds its edges in and becomes the hour before coffee, the hour when even the loudest rooms let the volume rest. The scanner stays quiet like a good neighbour. The card is elsewhere, under a lock, inventing its own darkness. He sleeps with his palms open. Morning shifts climb the stairs with their bags and their fresh shoes and the talk that comes with sunrise. Kids, traffic, the weather, pretending it means to rain. He is at his desk before most of them, jacket draped, tie tucked, the first cup of coffee at that line where steam stops and heat begins. The envelope's absence is a shape on the blotter. The card's details have been copied to a sheet that will not leave the building. He feels better with the copy. Copies make the world feel less singular. At 9, the meeting room fills with the usual mix. Metro, features, the gravels of photo, and the rasp of someone who has not yet discovered tea. The editor runs on habit. Today's stack, tomorrow's ideas, page counts, add shapes, what can jump to be, and what has to land above the fold if the city is going to see it before work. Then comes the orange. The room changes posture, without meaning to. Pens lift. Coffee pauses. He sketches the facts as if they are fence posts in a field you bring a friend to see. Addressed to him, Late October, drugstore card, cartoon front, pasted eyes, added line, back marked with cross and words, neat hand, number placed near the symbol, return name unhelpful, street correct, name misspelled the usual way. He doesn't give the phrasing out loud, that belongs to the page if the page earns it. He doesn't give the number out loud, that belongs to the police if the police decide the math should be public. He offers what helps the room understand the weight without tipping the scale toward the beat of a drum the sender would enjoy. Photo wants to shoot the card. Legal wants to know who has touched it. Metro wants to run it now. Features wants to run it right. A man at the end of the table says context, which is the word rooms use when they mean the city needs help thinking without panicking. The editor taps the pencil the way a judge touches a gavel without meaning to threaten. We will not be first, he says, not unkindly. We will be clear. Clear means the card exists. The card has these marks. There is a pattern of mail. The police are doing the work that belongs to them. Citizens can do the work that belongs to citizens. Eyes open, locks working, patience. Clear also means not handing the sender his favorite kind of mirror. They discuss whether to describe the back in full. They discuss whether to show the front. They discuss the line between informing and performing. The line is not a line, it is a fog bank. They choose anyway because papers do. He thinks of the buttons, of jokes that make a room breathe, and suggests a sidebar, how the newsroom copes when the story sits at one of its desks, not to grandstand, not to make it about themselves, but to make a small case for ordinary courage. Come to work, sharpen pencils, pick up the phone, even when the phone has taught you to flinch, write clean, go home. The editor nods without promising and circles a word on the board. Balance, because meetings love a word they can pin to a wall and call a plan. When the room breaks, the city resumes its noise. Layout begins the quiet ballet of blocks and inches. Photo finds a way to show texture without selling menace. Legal drafts the two sentences that keep the paper from saying more than it can. He returns to his desk and writes the paragraph that says the facts and none of the romance. A paragraph that feels like walking a curb with palms out. Steady, steady, don't look down, just step. Outside, the morning widens. Inside, the card is no longer only his. It belongs to the page now and to the readers, who will make their own small adjustments when they meet it over coffee. The work is not to tell them how to feel. The work is to set the table and let the city sit. The card does not simply travel, it is escorted. A detective arrives with the practical hush of a man who knows doors by their squeak. He signs twice, once for the building log and once for the property book, then opens a hard-sided case that smells faintly of plastic and one long-ago cigar. The card, now lifted with gloved fingers from a manila folder, becomes smaller under laboratory light. Paper shrinks when treated as evidence. It stops being a note and starts being a surface. He watches without narrating. Narration is for later. The inspector holds the sleeve open and a second set of hands, calm, almost priestly, slides the orange inside as if tucking a child against weather. A tag is written in block print, date, time, who found, who handled, where, condition. It is clipped to a second tag that names the case in the way offices name storms, by year first, then the shape everyone already recognizes. The string is tied with an everyday knot made ceremonial by attention. Under a desk lamp that hums in one note, the envelope and card are photographed beside a ruler whose inches look larger than they are. The camera's shutter makes a cheap clap. On a metal tray, a magnifier waits with its lens raised, a single round eye. When the card is placed beneath, the black lines thicken. The pasted eyes show their factory cut, not perfect circles, but slightly scalloped, the way die cuts sometimes betray their speed. The ink along the sentence on the front shines dully, a plain handwriting pen pressed with a tidy eagerness, no fountain luxuries, no brush drama. He notes that in his head a small index card filed under tools. The envelope's flap is studied for glue squeeze, the faint ridges where pressure leaves a geology. A technician dusts for prints with a brush that could have come from a woman's vanity, only it is devoted to powder so fine it floats like words you almost say. Tape whispers as it lifts possible futures from paper and lands them on clear squares that will live in a binder, older than most men in the room. No one expects a gift. Hope has manners here. It keeps its hat in its hands. Paper stock is compared to a drawer of envelopes labelled not with poetry, but with numbers, weights, brightness, watermark codes that turn a grocery product into a person with a past. Under angled light, faint letters bloom in the sheet's skin, a mill's signature hiding like a watermark moon. Not conclusive, they say, never conclusive, but it narrows. The postmark is read as if it were a palm, station number, date, a cancel wheel's particular bruise. Someone jots a note about the hour band in the circle, whether it favours morning or afternoon. He files that with the rest. Handwriting waits for its own choir of specialists. They will count how often a loop closes, how often it does not, whether a lowercase t prefers to be crossed early or late, whether the tail on y wanders into land not its own. They will measure the slant in degrees, they will pretend commendably that this is geometry and not human weather. He has come to respect geometry that remembers it is drawing a human face. When they are finished for now, the card returns to the sleeve to the case to a hand that will carry it without swinging. The detective signs again, the tidy print of a man who has signed in 400 rooms. "Will advise," he says, which is both a promise and a hedge. The door closes behind him with the sigh of a building that knows how to keep its breath. The space the card leaves on the blotter looks larger than the card ever was. He sits, writes a single sentence in his notebook, tag, sleeve, lab, no drama, and underlines it, not for emphasis but for steadiness. The city likes a show, the lab likes a list. Tonight, the list is what keeps the room from pitching. Before the card wore a sleeve, it rode a bin. He pictures the postal station not as a mystery cavern but as a set of practiced hands. Canvas hampers, grey trays with lips like shallow boats, belts that carry a day's talk from one table to another. A clerk in a blue shirt handles an armful that smells of rain and dust, checks the first digit of the zip as if it is a drumbeat, turns envelopes to face the same way, the little civic ballet that keeps a city in one piece. Somewhere in that tide, an orange square was just another bright fish. Postmarks are a kind of weather report. The cancel wheel presses its half moon, city, date, and sometimes, if the station still uses it, an hour band that speaks in broad swaths. AM, PM, a vague window into when the envelope kissed the clerk's hand. He has learned to read those faint impressions the way a farmer reads sky. The ink is always telling you more than you think if you learn its tenses. Wet, drying, dried crooked, because the envelope's seal hump lifted one edge of the stamp. He imagines the card at the culling belt, where hands sweep junk from letter, where odd shapes are rescued from the moor, where a skeleton on orange might make a clerk smile before the eye drops to the address and decides not to. He has walked a station once on a tour, carrier cases standing like choir stalls, each with a city's worth of fingers stuck between slots to keep space for streets. The case for the Chronicle bears labels sharpied by carriers who improved on the official ones, private mnemonics that say, more than route numbers do. A letter to the paper is the opposite of a love note. It seldom belongs to one person. This one did. Ink trials in the lab will try to tell where a pen was born. Not a house, never that. But sometimes a family, ballpoint of such and such manufacturer, domestic, mid-shelf. Stamps can betray a vending machine that still sells coils, or a window clerk strip with a serial of its own. Even a clean, careful sender leaves crumbs. The trick is not to pretend crumbs are bread. He respects the postal men because they do not dress their work in romance. Get it there intact. Let other rooms lift prints and guess at wrists. He thinks of the address block as a theatre too, the straight lines, the deliberate space between words. Machines prefer a certain order, so do eyes. Did the sender test the address with a ruler? Maybe. Did he square the envelope edge to the table before he wrote the P? Maybe. People love lines when they want to be believed. Crookedness is forgiven on birthday cards, not on threats. Carrier routes change when a carrier bids a better one or retires. The city's arteries learn new hands. None of that matters to the envelope once it passes the blue mouth of a box. It is carried by a nation of small motions, stamp, stack, slide, that will end at a front desk where a clerk stamps received with the gentle violence of habit. He writes a note for himself to call a friend at the station about the cancel wheel's condition this week. Not to pry, to learn the instrument's voice. Even a machine sings a little. If the sender wanted to be seen at any stage, he did not choose the post office for his audience. The postal path is quiet competence, fluorescent angels moving the world an inch at a time till morning arrives in the right mail slot. The orange card was only briefly a spectacle when the desk lamp found it. Before that, it was a citizen among millions, ferried by people who would be faintly disgusted to learn what it said. That is a kind of comfort. A city's hum moved a bad sentence without endorsing it. He honors the hum by writing its part down. The story runs clean, no theatrics, just the facts a city needs at breakfast. And then the city does what it always does when fear is printed in ink. It answers back. The first calls are easy to sort. A woman on Nob Hill says she received something similar last year, but threw it away because she won't be bullied by cowards. She now regrets the throw. A man from Daly City swears the handwriting looks like his brother-in-law's, whom he has never liked. A boy, 15 maybe, tries on a deep voice and says 3 sentences from the papers as if reciting lines on a dare. The switchboard apologizes again. He takes the calls that should not go to interns. A voice like old rope tells him about a circle and cross painted on a wall by teenagers near a schoolyard. He thanks the caller, takes the corner, the time, and passes it to a desk that does not roll its eyes at citizens. Another voice, clipped and military, offers a list of improvements he believes the newspaper should make to its security doors. He writes them down without argument and realizes halfway through that the man is not crazy, merely lonely, and that expertise likes a place to sit. Letters arrive too, real ones with stamps licked and envelopes addressed in hands that do not hide themselves. Most are kind in the way people are when they recognize a person carrying a thing they would rather not carry. Keep your head up. We read you. We believe you. Some are scolding. You're giving him what he wants. You're scaring my kids. He does not resent the scolds. Children are a good reason to scold. He has none and tries not to pretend. He knows the weight of that in a kitchen where small shoes sit by the door, like punctuation. One letter from a high school English teacher encloses 4 student essays on fear in American literature, as if the newsroom were a substitute classroom, and he reads them at lunch, surprised into relief by one line from a boy who writes that fear is not a monster but a hallway you keep entering because the light switch is around the corner. He copies the sentence into his notebook and underlines it once. Out of the mouths of children, the city occasionally publishes something useful. The angrier notes come on postcards, as if brevity adds authority. Vultures. Shut up. You'll get what's coming. He files them without keeping the return addresses. Threats to ink are older than this case and will outlast it. Threats don't know they're boring when they repeat themselves. Still, he tells the night desk which ones mention specific halls, specific doors, and after that a guard sits a little closer to the elevator past midnight, more for comfort than for combat. There are also the quiet calls, a widow who says the cross on the card looks like the mark a surveyor left on her street when the city replaced water mains. And is that connected? He tells her gently it is not, and she thanks him as if he has brought a casserole. A janitor from a theatre downtown says he found a scrap with letters in a stall and does not want to alarm anyone. He offers to leave it under the third tile by the box office so no one has to see him hand it over. He thanks the man and sends someone with a talent for kindness. He keeps a tally that is not the tally on the card. How many voices choose to help? How many choose to harm? How many simply need to hear another human at the other end? It comforts him that the helpful outnumber the showy by a margin that would look good on a scoreboard. The city is frightened, yes, but it is also domestic. People making coffee, correcting homework, checking back doors, reading aloud to whoever will listen. He ends one long day with ink on his fingers and the rotary phone's ring still buzzing in his skull. He sets his head on his arms at the desk and thinks, not of a skeleton on orange, but of the teacher's line about hallways and switches. He decides to keep walking the hallways with his hand out. The switch is always around a corner. It's the reaching that keeps a man from getting lost. His desk has a second stomach, the clippings drawer. It swallows what the day can't finish, strips of headlines, paragraphs carved out with a blade he keeps wrapped in tape, dates underlined in pencil. He opens it now and the paper smell lifts like dust in sun, old ink turned sweet by time. He sorts by reflex, early letters here, ciphers there, witness quotes that held steady, notes that bent under cross-exam, photographs whose edges have gone soft from being handled. The orange card will have a place in this order when the lab says it may. For now, he feeds the drawer with what can be fed. Copies, meeting notes, the teacher's line about hallways and switches, copied on a small card and tucked where his hand will find it on a bad night. Pattern is the newsroom's narcotic. It promises a shape under noise, a spine in a pile of bones. He knows the high too well. He guards against it with little rules. Never draw a line with fewer than 3 nails to hold it. Never call a coincidence a cousin. Never let a month do the thinking a map should do. Even so, when he lays the clippings shoulder to shoulder, summer to fall, fall to winter, codes beside boasts, proofs beside theatre, his mind begins its old, eager arithmetic. Holidays cluster. Postmarks lean towards certain stations. Misspellings repeat not just in names, but in small, stubborn ways. A certain way of writing the number 7 with a crossbar, a habit of giving the letter R a neat little hook, like a fish waiting for its river. He writes these private observations where they cannot tempt anyone but him. The page gets a title he never shows, Hunches Not for Print, and down the margin he numbers what the mind insists on seeing. 1. Timing favours spectacle. 2. Props repeat with slight improvements, like a magician revising a trick for a bigger room. 3. The writer's neatness is not a gift to investigators, it is a form of applause for himself. 4. Numbers are deployed as bait. Never take bait without gloves. He pauses over the years he has kept in this drawer, not just this case but others that taught him how to stand still when the crowd leans. A winter fire that was a heater and not a hand, a summer disappearance that turned out to be a boy who needed Montana more than algebra. These cured him of certainty. They also taught him the use of patient doubt. Doubt, held correctly, is not a fog. It is a lantern you can cup with both hands while you walk a ditch line looking for a broken fence. He adds a clipping from today's edition, the clean, unscented paragraph he wrote about the card. And on the back of it, he pencils the 3 calls that mattered most. The janitor's scrap retrieved with dignity, the widow reassured about the surveyor's mark, the teacher's packet of essays. He staples them together as if kindness belongs in the file as much as harm does. He believes it does. A case file that holds only curses is a liar. Pattern hunger has another danger. It makes the face of one man bigger than the faces of the people keeping the city together while he performs. He corrects for that by adding to the drawer a copy of the schedule for the carrier's routes and a note from the lab about the cancel wheel. Dull stuff that feels like ballast. He wants the weight right. He wants the drawer to close without creak, not because secrets live there, but because balance does. When the stack is squared, he slides the drawer shut and feels the desk resume its proper weight against the floor. He stands, stretches, and lets the need to connect everything pass like a weather front already losing interest in the bay. Patterns will be argued in other rooms by men who earn their meals on convictions. His meal is earned on sentences that tell the city what can be told without feeding the man who wants to be fed. The clippings wait in the dark, lined up like soldiers who understand the parade is tomorrow. He turns back to the blank sheet and writes the next small, honest line, the one that refuses to predict and simply records what the lamp can see. Down 2 flights from the city room, the paper keeps its most reliable weather, the morgue. Not the kind with tags on toes, the kind with tags on envelopes. A librarian with a pencil behind her ear rules this kingdom like a quiet conductor. Drawers slide in long, practiced sighs. Folders ride their rails, each one a spine of yesterday. He signs the ledger because the morgue likes manners, then asks for 3 things: holiday mail pieces from the last 10 years, previous letters with the same mark in their first public printings, and anything on newsroom security from papers that had to learn it the hard way. The librarian does not waste language. She nods once and vanishes into the cabinet forest. He stands at the tall table with the felt pad and lets its green calm his hands. Upstairs has coffee and clocks. Down here has time without numbers. Fluorescents hum a single note above him. He has learned to let that note pour cement into a man's thoughts, to anchor them where they might drift. Folders arrive stacked, their tab labels an honest handwriting that does not attempt to impress. He opens the first and finds a timeline the city forgot it wrote. Halloween coverage from years when the worst trouble was razor rumors that never proved, patrol recommendations about porch lights, smiling children in costume, pausing under stoops that have since been painted another color. He scans for the language of threat and finds mostly the language of caretaking. Check your candy, walk in groups, let your kids ring a bell you can see. He copies sentences that age well and leaves the rest where they belong, in years that did not know this one. The next folder is an echo chamber. Reproductions of envelopes stare up with their cross inside a circle, their tidy block print behaving like a boy on picture day. Sidebars remember each arrival's hour, the way a morning edition learned to bend around them. He notes the evolution of caution, how early headlines tried wit, how later ones tried medicine. He copies the dates, not because he needs them, but because dates are nails a roof needs, even a roof already standing. In a slim envelope at the back he finds letters to editors from other towns, written when another paper somewhere else became the stage for a man who used mail as theatre. Their advice is not lofty. Rotate who opens packages, keep a log visible where everyone writes the same way. Don't promise what police own, don't hoard what the public needs. A note in red pencil has been added by a previous keeper of this room. We did the first two. The third is the work forever." He smiles at that, at a stranger's small sermon in a place built for receipts. He pulls a drawer himself and finds the thick file labelled with the reporter's own name. He hesitates, not out of vanity but out of fairness, then slides it free because the morgue is not a shrine. It is a tool. Clippings flutter with his byline and others. Crime stories that stayed ordinary. A feature on a longshoreman who collected clocks. A brief on a council vote that made no one angry enough to write. The folder is heavier than it feels in the hand. He does not read long. A person can go soft, staring at versions of himself. He returns it to the slot, a book reshelved. When the librarian returns to check on him, he asks for microfilm on postal station features, human interest pieces that toured the back rooms when the paper felt like reminding readers how the city keeps its promises. She spools a reel and hands him the headphones with the cracked leather. Grainy frames clatter past, the past presented as a sequence of whites and blacks that pretend to be grey. A carrier laughs into a reporter's microphone about dogs that prefer ankles to art. A clerk explains the cancel wheel as if describing a family heirloom. In the noise of film, he hears again the simple faith of systems that start before dawn. Get it there, get it right. He makes his notes small and square and curtains them with boxes, a habit that keeps the chaos of lines from pretending to be poetry. Upstairs, the story will need 3 paragraphs of history that can stand without leaning. Down here, he finds the timbers. He thanks the librarian, who accepts thanks like a tip she is not allowed to pocket, and signs the ledger on his way out. The morgue swallows the folders and resumes its steady breathing, a basement full of yesterdays holding up a building full of today. He climbs the stairs with the feeling a diver has after surfacing, ears ringing, lungs clear, the world above, a little louder than before, but still the same street he left. The press room lives a floor the city rarely sees, a weather of its own, ink sweet as pennies, oil, hot paper, the breath of machines older than some editors. He walks there because the act of walking under headlines steadies him. Upstairs they argue inches, down here inches become muscle. The foreman, a square man with kind eyes that pretend not to be, lifts 2 fingers in greeting and does not ask questions. Questions are for rooms where noise takes turns. Here the noise is a country. You learn its borders by standing still. Plates arrive wrapped like pies. A man with scarred knuckles peels back the paper and reveals aluminum skins where mirror letter lives, reversed gospel waiting to be inked into something legible. He likes the moment when a page is only almost a page, when the story is a pattern of dark and light that refuses to speak until it is kissed by ink. The foreman lines a plate on the cylinder and tightens the clamps with a smooth brutality that reads as care. He has seen surgeons with the same economy. They run a proof and the first sheet comes slapping out wet and shy, the way a fish might land on a boat and be surprised by the deck. Men in aprons catch it with fingertips they've taught themselves to keep clean. Blue pencils hang from strings. The foreman marks a too bold rule here, a faint line there, the way a teacher corrects a music student's breath. Upstairs, he'd listened to balance. Down here, the blue pencil enforces it without speech. He asks for a look and gets one. The paragraph he wrote sits where it was told to sit. Shoulders square, verbs lined like shoes under a bed. No adjectives showing off. No exclamation marks breaking glass. The photo desk has chosen restraint. Not the card's face, not the pasted eyes, only the envelope under light, address visible, name spelled as it arrived, both right and wrong in the same breath, edges sharp enough to tell the truth without inviting anyone to clap. He feels grateful in the quiet way a man feels grateful for a bridge that holds. He watches the register marks kiss, a perfect cross in every corner, and thinks, absurdly, of the other cross on orange and how meaning changes with context. Here, a cross is promised. The colors will align. The world will not blur in the reader's hands. He files that private counterspell where he keeps the teacher's line about hallways and switches. Some nights a man needs proofs that are not philosophical. The presses thunder up slowly like a train choosing to believe in itself. Webs of paper thread through rollers with an elegance that is part physics, part faith. Speed climbs, the room sheds its drafts, heat knuckles into shoulders. Stacks form, white bricks banded and lifted and flown to trucks that will thread dawn while the city still negotiates its pillow. He stands back from the railing, superstition, courtesy, and looks down on the river of tomorrow. It calms him that something so loud can serve something so quiet as reading. A boy, no, a man, but young still, works the jogger where papers square their edges before they leave the building. He hums off-key, and the tune rides the machinery like a gull rides updrafts over a ferry. The foreman notices the humming and does not stop it. Some sounds belong even in industrial rooms. Some sounds declare a place human. He remembers a night years ago when a fire story changed 3 times before first run, and the pressman changed with it. Plates off, plates on, ink adjusted, the whole ballet done without temper. The memory helps now. It reminds him that the paper is not a mouth alone, it is also hands. Hands will tell the city tonight what can be told, and the telling will happen with rollers and ink and men who know talk better than metaphor. When the first truck backs to the dock, he steps aside so bodies that lift for a living can pass. The foreman tears a copy from a stack not yet tall and hands it over with a shrug that is almost ceremony. He does not read at once. He feels the weight, breathes the ink, and only then lets his eyes find the paragraph that brought him here. On the page, the story behaves. The paragraph does its job and does not change shape under his gaze. He folds the paper once, then again, and tucks it under his arm like a rolled map. Upstairs, the card is evidence. Down here, the antidote is simple. Deliver the facts on time, in order, to doorsteps that will meet them in slippers. He thanks the foreman with a nod. The nod comes back. The presses keep speaking their metal prayer, and for a little while he lets the prayer say his fear out loud, so he doesn't have to. The morning after a press run always invents its own weather. Calls, notes slid under doors, a stack of fresh papers on every flat surface. But this morning adds a quality he recognizes from other long stories, echoes. When a thing becomes public, it breeds cousins. By noon, 2 more envelopes have been held up to the light by clerks in other buildings across town. One a child's prank, crayons pressed so hard the paper bruised. The other an earnest, frightened letter from a man who sees circles in everything and would like the city to notice his circles too. He reads both with the patience that keeps rooms kind. Fear dilates the pupils. It also smudges the margins. The job is to separate signal from the smudge without sneering at the hand that made it. Copycats are not new. He files them with a name he borrowed from an old sergeant. Contaminants. Not evil, not useful, just substances that make the test harder by being present. He thanks the clerk who caught the crayon and tells the desk to send a soft word back to the man with the circles. He does not mock either one in the newsroom, not because he is saintly, but because mockery salts the ground where real tips want to grow. A city will speak if spoken to gently. It will also shut its mouth if laughed at. He wants mouths open. The day pushes on in small, practical bites. He answers mail with a fountain pen because nibs slow a man down, and slow is good for tone. He walks the block at lunch because moving air is better than sitting with the air that moved him last night. He observes the ordinary, a woman choosing apples by touch, a bus driver rubbing his neck at the end of a route, a mechanic explaining a rattle to a man who will nod no matter what's said. Ordinary is medicine. It does not cure, but it makes the patient remember his name. Back upstairs, the editor slides a memo across the desk. Guidelines to keep everybody from tripping the same wire twice. No reproduction of handwriting unless law asks. No publication of number claims without context they can't wear like a ribbon. No adjectives where a noun will do. He signs it as if the paper were asking him to renew vows. He believes in vows that make sentences behave. He believes in the way restraint reads as respect when the reader meets it with coffee and a second slice of toast. Afternoon tilts toward evening and the room's sound begins to round off its corners. Someone's radio, barely there, gives the weather a voice. Morning fog, inland warm. He stacks the day's notes and trims them, removing the words that told him how to feel while he was writing. He keeps only the shape that will hold for another pair of eyes. He resists the urge to polish fear into literature. Fear does not need polish. It needs fences and labels and an honest map. A call comes from a theatre manager who has found a tiny circle and cross scratched into a restroom door with a key. He thanks the man, asks 2 follow-ups that will sound like care and not like ritual, and passes what matters to a detective who has learned to say appreciated in a way that makes citizens feel it. Another call comes from a mother who wants to know if she should cancel trick-or-treating. He could say what the city will say, use judgment, walk in groups, carry light, but instead he says the true thing he can own. Do what lets your child remember tonight as a street with neighbors, not a rule spoken by a stranger. She sighs the sigh of a person who wanted permission to be ordinary. He is glad to have granted it. Near 6, he stands at the window and watches the day trade itself for gold. Roofs warm, birds decide, buses fill and empty. He feels the edges of himself again, clear and square. The card is not here. It does not live on this desk. It's a thing in a sleeve moving through its evidence life, and he is a man in a chair moving through his sentence life. Echoes will keep arriving. Some will be hoots from alleys, some will be serious and sad. He will answer. He will clean the words. He will leave the story unadorned enough for a reader to climb through it without catching on anything. Outside, a boy throws a newspaper so that it spins like a coin and lands flat on a porch. The sight pleases him out of proportion. Flat is good. Flat tells a truth and then lets the door open. He turns back to the typewriter and begins the next paragraph that refuses to tremble. By the time October tips into its last costume, the city has put on its own face. Paper pumpkins taped to glass, cotton webs that catch more dusk than spiders, a line of candles in jelly jars trembling in windows that don't otherwise care for flame. He walks home along a longer route on purpose, not to test himself, just to take the temperature. Children move in small herds with adult satellites, the costumes pragmatic more than perfect. Witch hats pinned with bobby pins, a pirate's sash borrowed from a curtain tie, a cardboard robot that steams gently from the mouth cut to breathe. Say thank you, someone prompts, and the chorus answers, small and proud. He notices what's new because of the card and what isn't because of the city. Porch lights burn brighter, that's new. Parents carry flashlights like gentle batons. New, police cars idle at the end of longer blocks, new and old at once. But there is also the sound he remembers from his own younger nights, the hollow slap of a plastic bucket when a child forgets to hold it steady, the giddy disorder of capes that catch on shrubbery, the way a street can briefly become a village if enough doors open within the same hour. He measures this too. Fear puts on its costume. Ordinary life keeps wearing its own. On one porch, a man in a cardigan asks a princess her name, and when she says it with the grave dignity of a person introduced at court, he says the name back like a toast. The princess receives her candy and a second gummy glow stick, which she holds like a wand that has remembered how to give light. He thinks about the call from the mother who wanted permission for exactly this: sidewalks and porches, the old choreography of knock and smile, and feels a private relief that advice can sometimes be that simple. Let the child remember a street of neighbors. Let October be a night with windows. He passes a hardware store that has set a bowl on a stool with a sign that says, "Take one." The bowl is almost empty and the sign has failed to convince anyone of arithmetic. He laughs quietly at the efficiency with which children discover the limits of rules written on poster board. A block later, a man with a dog the size of an ottoman stands watch at a crosswalk and says "Happy Halloween" to both directions with the unforced cheer of a man who likes useful holidays. The dog sighs like an accordion and leans on his knees. If Menace is out tonight, it has the courtesy to choose a different neighborhood. At a corner, he stops because a girl dressed as a skeleton, cheerful, glow-in-the-dark bones, nothing like the orange card's pasted eyes, has dropped a ring of cheap gold on the pavement. He bends, retrieves it, and sets it in her open palm. "You saved my treasure," she says, and he answers, "It's what reporters do," which is a joke only if you don't mean it. Her mother thanks him with a nod meant to serve as both gratitude and a boundary. The nod says, "We see you, keep walking." He does. Windows do the work he wants them to do: reflect, reassure. In plate glass, he checks what follows him and sees only himself acquiring candy corn in a reflection he does not deserve. In apartment panes, he reads the old domestic play. Someone stirring a pot with a wooden spoon, someone pinning a hem on a cape before the child notices the rip, someone putting on a record because music keeps a room from becoming a waiting room. He files these as counterweights in the ledger that tonight insists on balancing. A patrol car rolls by slow, its cabin blue, two silhouettes inside, the driver's forearm resting at the window in that posture of bored vigilance that keeps cities together. He lifts a hand the way one lifts a hand to a neighbor who waters the strip of grass between sidewalk and curb every evening. The patrolman lifts two fingers in return. Recognition without conversation, contract without speeches. On his block, a boy dressed as a surveyor, helmet, clipboard, a borrowed tape measure slung like a sash, has drawn a circle with a chalk cross on the sidewalk and is explaining to a friend how maps work. The chalk is bright, harmless. The cross means corners and distances, not threats. He watches the boy measure from lamppost to stoop and thinks of how signs change their meaning when carried by different hands. The boys move on. The chalk stays as an outline of something honest, this to that, here to there, no theatre in it, only math. He lets his key find the door, and the door give way with its familiar resistance. Inside, he clicks a lamp and stands for the count of 5, listening to the echo of small voices outside, the punctuating shrieks of delighted fright, the staccato of parents laughing at surprises they saw coming. The night wears its costume well. It has chosen to be a village instead of a stage, and he feels more grateful than he can say that a city sometimes makes that choice for itself. He sets his hat on the table, writes a single line in his notebook, "Halloween passed through like a parade, not a siren," and underlines it once to fix the truth where memory will later try to edit. Morning does not ask permission. It lays itself over the city like paper over a tray, flat, practical, intent on taking a print. He stands at the window with coffee cooling faster than it ought, and inventories what the night chose to keep. A smear of chalk where a boy measured his empire, 3 wrappers pressed politely into the top of his trash, a faint sugar on the air from pumpkins that burned to waxy crowns. The loud parts have withdrawn. The residue is what counts, small, domestic, honest as crumbs. At the paper, desks put back on their ties. The men who stayed late swap notes that are not quite stories, who called, who tried a joke and found it didn't carry, who walked to the lot in pairs without making a parade of it. He sits and lets the chair tell him he belongs to it again. The card is still out there in its evidence life, swimming a quiet route between sleeve, tag, cupboard. Reports will multiply like careful ivy, the kind that looks decorative until you learn how deep the roots go. He respects that process the way a man respects a clock he can't repair, by listening for regular ticks and worrying only when silence arrives. He returns calls because returning calls is the kind of order that keeps a roof up. A woman who left 3 messages to say she thought she saw the symbol in the grain of her oak table laughs at herself and asks him not to write about the calls. He promises, because promises are a currency that has to retain value in small transactions or else everything goes to barter. A detective leaves word, nothing new to offer, and yet the courtesy is a message of its own. Still here? Still looking? Still treating paper like a witness with a good memory. He flips his notebook back to the line he underlined last night. Halloween passed through like a parade, not a siren, and builds a small column around it, not to make celebration, only to make a record of the city's choice. He writes about porch lights and jelly jar candles and a dog leaning against a man's knees. He doesn't mention fear because fear is present even when unnamed. It's the glass over the print, not the ink itself. He sends the copy along and keeps the tone simple on purpose. Sleep food, warm and plain. The mail brings its own coda. One envelope holds a clipping from a paper in a smaller town where the editors wrote about their own October in 3 paragraphs and let the last line belong to a child's description of the moon as a streetlight for clouds. He tapes that to the inside of his drawer like a postcard from a cousin. Another envelope carries a single index card with a fountain pen sentence. Thank you for not making a show of it. No signature. No need. He visits the lab because the slow rooms sometimes heal faster than the fast ones. The technician with the vanity brush nods him toward the log without moving his hands from the work. A lens leans over the orange like an inquisitive moon. Notes have appeared in a tidy, almost pastoral hand. Ink brand likely, stock weight, watermark letter, faint but legible. Nothing decisive, everything useful. The detective arrives while he stands there and says the 2 words that keep men from grandstanding as expected, which in this context mean, we are not in a movie. The movie is outside us, and we will not be extras in it. Back at his desk he cleans a sentence that wants to be pretty until it is only true. He ashes a pencil and sharpens it twice because ritual is just a way of telling your hands how to be when your head is busy. The phone has fewer teeth today. The room remembers how to ignore itself again. He copies a map grid onto a clean sheet and pins nothing to it, a reminder that blankness can be a position and not a failure. Twice he catches himself listening for the card, like a man listens for a kettle, expecting the room to tell him when to move. Twice the room does not, and he moves anyway, to the water cooler, to the window, back to the typewriter, where the ribbon keeps its secret arithmetic. The orange rectangle has been translated into paragraphs and tags and numbers in small boxes on forms. Its power to perform is diminished by being handled, and that is the point of handling. Evidence is theatre that has been asked to stop speaking and start submitting to measurements. On his way out, he pauses at the green lamp and does not touch the chain. He wants to leave it off and let the desk be only wood. He wants the night to come back as a room again and not as a mask. Outside, daylight picks loose threads from the fog, and the street does what streets do, carry the city forward one measured slab at a time. He walks into it with ordinary strides, a man who has learned that the aftermath of a parade is not confetti. It is brooms, dustpans, the soft bristles doing the small work that makes it possible to open the door tomorrow and mean it. The card lives elsewhere now, inside a box that lives inside a room that lives behind a door with a list of names beside it. Paper becomes quieter when it learns to answer to numbers. He has visited enough times to trust the silence, a hum from the lights, the soft wick of tape pulled from a roll, the slow breathe-in of men who read with lenses. In a ledger, the orange rectangle is not orange. It is a line with a date and the neat climb of a property number. The ledger does not scare. Ledgers do not have faces. He finds comfort in that small cruelty, how bureaucracy sands edges until even a taunt sits flush with the page. Back upstairs, the newsroom reheats its ordinary. Sports argues a headline that wants 2 verbs. Features cuts a paragraph that admired itself too long. City desk stacks notes for a council meeting where the arguments are older than the chairs. A memo curls slightly at the corner where a thumb worried it. The memo says what memos say. We will be clear, we will be careful, we will go home after. He rests a hand on the paper as if taking its pulse. The beat is good. He calls the station that tends the cancel wheel and asks the clerk who's been there longest whether the wheel still bites a little heavy on one side. She laughs the laugh of a person pleased to be asked about a thing only she loves. Always to the south, she says. And he writes south even though it is not compass, not evidence, just a human quirk he wants to keep. He thanks her with more syllables than needed. She accepts them like stamps in a book. By late afternoon, fog moves in with its swayed patience. He writes 2 short pieces that are mostly labels, what is known, whom to call, where not to waste a detective's hour, and signs his name without enjoying it. Names are for grocery lists and voter rolls and children called in from the street. A name on fear feels like a coat borrowed for a funeral. He wears it anyway because work, not because costume. He files, he checks, he trims a stray adverb like a hangnail. A colleague stops at his desk and sets down a paper cup with a lid he didn't ask for. "You look like a man who forgot how to drink water," she says. He smiles, drinks, remembers. Kindness is a habit too. He writes water on the corner of his pad as if the act of noting could keep the body honest. Across the room, someone's laugh remembers itself, loud for a moment and then modest. The room tolerates it. Rooms should. Evening returns, not with a drum, but with the tidy click of clocks aligning. He puts the day's notes where the morning will find them, closes the clippings drawer so gently it does not confess it ever opened, and straightens the telephone so its cord lies like a line on a map. He lets his eyes touch the empty space where the envelope sat last night, and finds it empty in the best way. No ghost shape, no residue, only blotter. He has learned to trust cleaned surfaces. They are not denial, they are promise. Next thing, next day. At the door, he looks back because people in rooms always look back. The green lamp waits. He crosses to it and pulls the chain, not to light the stage, but to test the room's willingness to be dark. The bulb answers with a small, dignified no. He leaves it that way. The desk belongs to Night now, and Night deserves blank paper. The elevator takes him down with the old seams groaning like a man stretching. The lobby smells of tile and a lemon the janitor trusts. Outside, Market Street tries on its neon bones. Buses confess their routes in white letters. A newsstand breathes ink. He walks the same path he walked last night and does not count his steps. He notices a window where a woman has placed 3 pears on a sill, green and patient. and decides that is the headline he will keep. He reaches his car, checks, and does not overcheck, sits, starts, lets the radio talk about weather like a friend describing a dream. The city's voice is steady again. The orange card remains a fact among other facts, boxed, tagged, present, diminished by handling, enlarged only by memory in rooms where memory is paid to be careful. At home, the door sticks obligingly. He lights one lamp and then another and then none. The radiator ticks its honest music. He lays his notebook open to a clean page and writes a single line to end the day. Arrived, described, kept it smaller than it wanted to be. He closes the cover and the room holds. Outside, a siren chooses a different street. Inside, the lamp stays dark by his choice, not by fears. He lets that be the last decision tonight and feels it take. The weeks do not rush. They settle like dust that has learned the shape of a room. He discovers that quiet can be a residue, not a relief. The card is no longer on his desk, not even as a space where it once lay, and yet its manners remain. Colleagues pause a breath before laughing. The night watchman lingers half a second longer at the glass. The elevator seems to clear its throat before every arrival. Routine returns wearing a slightly larger coat. He measures the distance between then and now in small units. How quickly a clerk answers the phone, how soon a coffee pot empties, whether the map on the center table stays rolled or finds an elbow to hold it open. The map stays rolled. The phone answers quicker. The coffee pot learns a new cadence and no one complains. People adapt with the same stubborn gentleness as a fern in a stairwell, bending toward whatever light will do. Letters continue to arrive, but their voices change. Fewer boast, more advise. A retired mail carrier writes 4 pages on how to read a neighborhood by its porches. He underlines 2 sentences and saves them for a story that may never need them. A mother sends a Polaroid of her daughter dressed as a skeleton, glow bones lit like a diagram of joy. On the back, she has written, "We walked." She laughed. "Thank you for not teaching fear as homework." He tapes that one under the drawer's lip, a private flag. He visits the lab less, not out of disinterest, but because the work there obeys its own calendar. Evidence ripens, not like fruit, but like minutes in a jar, counted, labeled, stacked. The technician with the vanity brush adds lines to a form that grows almost beautiful in its completeness. The detective speaks in the committed monotone of a man who refuses to audition for anyone's idea of a detective. "Still work," he says once in the hallway, and somehow the lack of article is the most honest part of the sentence. Still work, yes. At night, he returns to the same stair, the same stubborn door, the lamp he sometimes refuses to light just to prove he can. He times his breathing to the radiator's ticks because a metronome is a friend. The radio remembers a baseball game from a week before and plays a highlight as if it just happened. He lets it, grateful for a replay that does not ask him to hold his breath. The scanner stays off unless thunder in his chest requires another voice in the room, and even then he keeps it quiet enough to pretend it is only rain. He writes fewer lines about the card and more about the slow infrastructure that holds a city up when theatre tries to soar through the stage, the postal cancel wheel that bites to the south no matter who is on shift, the patrolman who invents small talk so children learn the sound of safety, the librarian in the morgue who knows which drawer has the memory you need before you know to ask. He files those pieces under headings that never make the page: competence, ordinary, unremarkable miracles, and sleeps better on the nights he can stack them. Fear, he learns, does not ask for the headline forever. It asks for the habits. He refuses to hand them over. He still walks a different route once a week to check which streets know his shoes. The rest of the days he takes the same path, to remind his feet what home feels like. He still glances at glass, but he glances with the courtesy of a neighbor, not the suspicion of a sentry. The difference lives in his shoulders. They ride lower again. A young reporter joins the desk, a second-hand tie, the ambition of a man who mistakes speed for heat. The kid asks careless questions about the card in the way of someone who has read clippings but not rooms. He answers what should be answered and lets silence do the correcting. Later, when the kid brings him a paragraph with 3 adjectives too many, he removes 2 with a pencil and leaves 1 in place like a mercy. "Let the facts be the verbs," he says. The kid nods as if he invented the rule. On a Sunday, he takes the paper to a bench that sees the bay and reads it like any reader does, front to back, skipping the parts that drag. A dog insists on being admired. He obliges. A ferry writes a white line across grey water, as if dividing the page. He closes his eyes. Breath in, breath out. The city keeps happening, not because it has forgotten the orange card, but because it remembers itself more. Weeks later, that is the quiet that stays, not the absence of noise, but the presence of a choice. Arrive, describe, keep it smaller than it wants to be, and go on. On a Tuesday that cannot decide between sun and fog, he walks a block he hasn't in years. Stationery Row, where windows arrange pens like cutlery, and paper sits in stacks that make gravity look patient. He tells himself he's here for an errand, envelopes for home, a new ledger with squares that tame lists. But the errand is a coat for curiosity. Tools say things. He wants to hear what the orange card's tools might have said before they became evidence. The first shop smells of starch and cardboard. Along the wall, ballpoints march in their plastic uniforms, medium, fine, extra fine, blue-black, that will never be truly blue. He asks the clerk for something common, and the clerk smiles, an expert at decoding customers who want to be ordinary on purpose. She lays out 3 pens that every office buys by the gross. He uncaps one, makes a test line on the blotter sheet they keep for strangers, and watches the ink lay down a track with a slight shine before it turns matte. It looks like the sentence on the card did the night he first read it, fresh enough to catch light, deliberate enough to hold its edge. "These dry honest," the clerk says. He buys a dozen and knows he will use 2. Paper is harder. He presses his thumb into a sheaf of envelopes until the fibers speak, a muffled resistance in cheap stock, a clean return in better. The orange card rode in a sheet that felt like a grocery aisle, not trash, not heirloom, the middle mass-produced country where most American paper lives. He finds a box with that feel and turns it over to read the watermark code, the factory prints for buyers, and the lab reads for courts. The clerk doesn't watch him read the underside of boxes. Good clerks let odd rituals bloom and pretend they are normal garden plants. He buys a pack and tucks it under his arm like a file he does not need to open yet. A rack of greeting cards tilts near the register, wedding bells that learned restraint, birthdays with jokes that won't scare an aunt, October grins printed on stock that has forgotten trees. He flips past pumpkins and cats until a skeleton grins up with that gentle store-bought wobble. Not the one. A cousin, maybe. A nationwide cousin who lives in 10,000 racks today and will live in 10,000 drawers by Christmas. He turns the package and notes the distributor, the 3-letter code for a printer the lab would recognize, the price that keeps under $1 because holidays like to be cheap, at the point of purchase and expensive once memory does its math. Outside, the light pretends to brighten. He crosses to another shop where the owner keeps a narrow glass case for nibs and a private museum's worth of advice. "You look like a man who wants to write tidily without calling attention to it," the owner says, and he laughs because the sentence is a mirror he did not expect to meet. They talk slants and pressures, how a downstroke betrays temperament, how a hand that likes control will cross its teeter hair too low. He doesn't say why he's asking. The owner doesn't ask why he wants to know. Some conversations are a handshake that never bothers to open its fingers. He buys nothing expensive. He buys a stapler that bites clean and a pencil sharpener that shaves cedar thin as onion skin. At the door, he pauses at a stand of rulers and chooses one with a brass edge heavy enough to keep paper honest when a hand pushes. In the window glass, he sees his own face practicing neutrality and decides to let it keep the practice. The street is ordinary enough to cure him. Men loading boxes, a woman arguing with a meter, a dog reading a lamppost like a book he's read before. Back at the desk, he tests a pen on his own blotter and watches the line go glossy, then dull, then part of the paper. He writes 3 words, ink, paper, tools, and boxes them in with the new ruler as if corralled words are safer than loose ones. None of this will solve anything. He knows that, but it reminds him that threat used the same aisles as errands, the same racks as birthdays, the same pens as grocery lists. That is not a comfort exactly. It is a measurement. The distance between cheap materials and costly sentences is a hand and a choice. His job is to witness the choice, name the tools without glamour, and keep the page from adopting the theatre of the man who borrowed October to make a room look at him. Rain arrives like a clerk who knows the building better than anyone. Keys already out, lights on before anyone asks. It starts as a rumour on the window, a rehearsal of small taps, then commits. Market Street turns the colour of newsprint left in a gutter, and crosswalks shine with a polish no shoe can claim. From his desk he watches the city trade dust for gloss. Chalk maps fade, tape on posters curls at the corners, the paper pumpkins in windows become darker oranges as if thinking. Rain edits. It crosses out what doesn't matter and underlines what survives. He walks for coffee because umbrellas make men honest. They cannot swagger and stay dry. The lobby smells like wool and lemon, a winter he trusts, and the elevator breathes its steel breath without surprise. Outside, the newspaper boxes blink with drops. The headlines wear freckles they didn't choose. A bus huffs at a stop and volunteers a sigh that could belong to any decade. People move with the cooperative caution of ships in a narrow channel. No sudden tax, no theatre, just passage. At the corner, he stops because the curb has organized itself into a temporary river. Leaves swirl like coins. He thinks of the orange card's ink, how it shone when fresh and then learned to be dull, and wonders which pens in the world keep their boasts when the weather presses a thumb. The truth, he knows, is that most inks are braver in the aisle than they are outdoors. That is a comfort disguised as chemistry. Not all marks want to last. Some are satisfied with the flair of arrival. Back upstairs, the newsroom wears rain like a second ceiling, muted, steady, kind to voices. Typewriter bells ping softly, their little victory notes absorbed by the carpet, and phones ring with an etiquette that storms teach. Speak, don't shout. He sets the coffee down on a square of yesterday's sports and watches a dark circle bloom and then settle, the paper proving again that it can take a small mistake and become stronger for having carried it. The metaphor arrives, proud of itself, he lets it pass. Work likes simple tools, not clever mirrors. He pulls the clippings drawer half open and leaves it as a mouth that means to speak later. Outside the window, a man with a broom draws a slow line along the edge of the curb, ushering what the sky has decided into neat rows toward the drain. The act feels ecclesiastical, liturgy for silt. He writes one word, stewardship. It does not belong in the next paragraph he owes, but it belongs somewhere, and the notebook forgives him the luxury of holding it. Rain resets roots. He will not take the alley tonight because alleys wear rain badly. They keep its smell too long. He will choose the street with the diner whose windows sweat, the sound of plates, and the discipline of spoons on china, offering proof that rooms can be warm regardless of the year's behavior. He will let his coat drip on a chair and not apologize, a small rebellion against a week that demanded apologies for ordinary breaths. A call comes from downstairs, front desk, with the tone that says, "Not urgent, not nothing." A parcel, it turns out, is only a parcel. A book he requested months ago about surveyor's marks and how cities once carved their geometry into stone. He thanks the clerk and feels stupidly lucky for a package that promises nothing more than pages that honor corners and distances. He signs, he carries, he returns to the desk, and the book sits beside the coffee like a square, quiet friend. As afternoon leans into the early dark, the editor walks the aisle and leaves his hand on the back of each chair for exactly 1 second, a benediction disguised as habit. "Roads will slick," he says, which is not an order, but a grace. Go when you should, go safely. He nods, stacks, wraps a rubber band around the day to keep it from splaying, and pockets the book, because a pocket is a shelter, and books like being under roofs. On the way out, he stands just inside the door and listens to the rain on the awning. The sound is the city teaching itself to breathe at an even pace. He thinks of the card boxed and tagged in a room where weather cannot reach it, and takes comfort in the opposite, that outside weather reaches everything. Street chalk, pasted eyes, a number written tidy, none of these are built for water. He steps into it with a practiced tilt of the umbrella and lets the rain say what it always says to every mark that thinks it can outtalk time. We'll see. He opens the book like a man lifting a lid on a calm machine. Pages smell of glue and a warehouse that kept clean habits. The diagrams are patient, triangles walking across countryside, distances argued into peace by numbers, little crosses chipped into stone to tell future feet where certainty once stood. He likes how the authors write. No fever, no audience, only instructions refined by weather and error. A city is not magic here. It is a set of agreements you can stand a tripod on. He studies a plate that shows a benchmark cut into a curb, broad arrow, chisel bites visible, the sort of mark a boy with chalk might copy for play. The caption calls it permanent. He tests the word in his mouth and decides he prefers durable. Permanent is a boast, durable is a promise with calluses. The orange card wanted permanent, tried to scratch its circle and cross into a year. The surveyor's stone accepts rain, feet, time, and keeps saying, "Here, not me." A chapter on field notes reads like prayer. Date first, then weather, then instrument error, then the line you meant to run and the line you did. There's dignity in admitting the drift. He copies a sentence into his notebook, records the deviation without apology, and underlines it because the newsroom practices a cousin of this faith. The fact does not humbly bow to the story you hope to tell. It stands where it stands, and your job is to measure again until the tape agrees with the earth. He turns to the plates that show triangulation, 3 points speaking to one another across hills until a fourth can be trusted. He thinks of his clippings drawer and smiles at how badly pattern hunger imitates science. Triangles in the book do not flatter themselves. They are tools, not metaphors. They do their work and leave. He traces one with a pencil, light as dust, then erases it because he was raised by librarians and respects things that outlast the impulse to annotate. A diagram of a transit catches him, brass and glass, leveling screws like tiny altars at the corners. The drawing names each piece without trying to make you love it. He does anyway. He imagines the weight of it on a shoulder, the relief of setting it down, the satisfaction of the bubble centered. Centering is a practice, not an achievement. He writes that too in the margin of his own thoughts, because some truths are better carried as pocket sentences than as headlines. Rain ticks the window, patient as a metronome, and the room finds a shared tempo. He reads how early crews carried chains, actual chains, links that learned a country by touch, and how a good party moved like a small orchestra. Head chainman, rear chainman, flagman, axeman, each name practical enough to survive humour. The book lists common errors and how to forgive them, kinks, hills lying about distance, a hand that reads the wrong line on a rod. He respects a discipline that assumes humans will be human and builds correction into the form. He pauses at a photograph, a benchmark sunk into a wall at waist height, a cross and a number, moss choosing its corners. The caption says it has been there 50 years and still serves. He closes his eyes briefly and lets the image push against the orange card, like two magnets refusing to kiss. One mark wants a city to stare. The other wants a city to stand. He knows which one deserves ink. When he looks up, the office is the same. Lamps, cups, men making rectangles of words. But the book has retuned the air. He feels less interested in performance, more fond of craft. He drafts a short piece about the things a city decides to keep. Cornerstones, mile markers, swallowed by ivy but still true, brass discs with small crosses that point surveyors home. He does not mention the card, he doesn't need to. Absence can be an argument. Before he closes the cover, he tucks a scrap of paper at the chapter on field notes, the way a man marks a psalm he means to read again. Record the deviation without apology. He thinks of the misspelling on his own envelope and how he wrote it down once, then again, without pretending it made a map. Some deviations announce a person, others announce a hill. The book teaches him to tell which is which. He sets the volume beside the typewriter where it can stare without scolding. Outside, gutters talk in a low voice, the rain writing its own steady ledger down market. He breathes with the page for a moment longer, and then rolls paper into the carriage. Triangulate, he thinks, not between theories and fears, but between what is seen, what is measured, and what admits it was wrong and begins again. The keys answer with their old factual clatter, and the paragraph walks out onto the line like a man with a levelling rod, willing to be corrected by ground and light. The report arrives folded once, official without ceremony, the kind of paper that has lived in drawers with siblings, fibre strong, corners blunt from respect rather than use. He opens it at his desk and lets the findings breathe. There is no music in the sentences, that comforts him. Conclusions written like slogans are for parades. These are for rooms with pencils. The first page speaks of habits, not identities. Downstrokes show firmness without flourish. Crossbars tend low. The loop on lowercase g narrows as if the wrist distrusts air. The R prefers a small hook. He had noticed that. While the S skates like someone who learned penmanship from a stern aunt and then taught himself loopholes. Pressures are consistent enough to suggest patience. The hand likes to arrive on time. He reads the phrase he expected, a sentence that belongs in every file because it belongs in the world, cannot be excluded. The investigators mean it as a fence, not a trumpet. Within the fence are comparisons to earlier letters, similarities marked, differences not dispositive, a knot of language tied precisely so no one can tug it into revelation. He respects the knot. Taut and honest is better than slack and suggestive. Margins hold the parts he loves, measurements the public never sees, angle of slant rendered in degrees, pen lift counted like soft footfalls, how many in a line where they land before and after the cross on a T, baseline drift traced with a thin rule until the sentence reveals its fatigue, the way a walker loosens toward home. The report has the generosity to assume human beings get tired, even when they pretend not to. He copies one line, late line laxity noted, pattern consistent with prior submissions. He underlines only consistent. Footnotes travel to the place he wanted them to, the place where theatre becomes arithmetic. Ink family, common. Stop. Unremarkable. Source. Widely available. Nothing exotic means everything useful. A man who buys ordinary tools relies on audience, not artifacts. The city should hear that more often. He flips to the page where examiners have printed sample letters beside the questioned ones, columns of A's and E's, lined like recruits, each wearing its small uniform, each betraying the quirk of its maker. The questioned hand likes neatness more than grace. It tightens at the end of strokes as if tidying a room no one else will enter. He imagines the desk, cleared space, elbow close, quiet. He imagines a man pleased with his own ability to make a line behave. Pleased is not proof, but pleased is part of the portrait. The final paragraph refuses applause. Findings are consistent with, but not solely determinative of, common authorship. He lets the cadence of that sink, consistent with, not solely determinative of. A pose most people never learn to hold, firm without boast, useful without promise. He smiles because the restraint is a kind of love letter to the craft, and because even in this story there are crafts that refuse to dress in costume. He does not run to the city desk with the report. He walks. He sets it down in the editor's inbox and adds a note that is only a label. Handwriting, summary follows. In his notebook he writes 3 lines that will not print but will steer him anyway. Common tools, uncommon patience, neatness as performance. Certainty's border, well policed. He boxes them in, a small fence, inside which his sentences can graze without getting lost. Afternoon light pulls long across the floor, revealing scuffs in linoleum that a janitor will later polish into good manners. Phones ring less like alarms and more like bells marking the hour. He rereads the first page for anything his hope might have added and finds nothing hope-shaped. Good. Hope is welcome in kitchens and cheap in evidence rooms. On the way out, he stops by the lab with 2 cups and leaves one by the brush and powder, as an offering to the men who measure. Nothing to shout, the technician says, accepting the cup with a nod. Nothing to shout, he repeats, and feels the phrase line up with his ribs. In a story built to bait exclamation points, a quiet report is a spoke that keeps the wheel true. Night meets him at the door, like an old co-worker who never clocks out. He walks with a pace that refuses dramatics. The envelope is long gone to its shelves, the card a colour in memory more than in hand. The report has given him nothing to sell to excitement, and much to sell to patience. Margins remain margins. He prefers them that way. Tomorrow he will write the sentence that does not overreach. Tonight he will let the city's handwriting, its rain on awnings, its bus numbers blinking steady, its neon vowels, sign the air, and he will sign back by getting home in one piece. Weeks tilt into months the way a file fattens, quietly by accumulation. The orange card has become a date in a ledger line, an item that requires a key to see. He can recite the property number without checking and still prefers not to. Numbers belong to rooms with locks. He belongs to the page. The newsroom has resumed its weather, sports with its enthusiastic future tense, city desk with its patient arguments, photo with its habit of catching people mid-breath and making it look like thought. He works inside that weather with the plain faith of a man who believes in umbrellas. Some nights he still takes the longer route to the lot, not to dramatize anything, only to keep the map of his feet current. Streetlights rehearse their small theatre, flicker, commit, and windows offer their usual domestic news. A woman ironing a sleeve to compliance, a man slicing an apple into precise moons, a child arranging soldiers in a democracy along a rug. These reports beat any bulletin. The city does not write them down, but it remembers. He learns which details refuse to fade. The misspelling remains loud in his head, not because it's clever, but because it's obstinate, like a door that sticks for a reason the carpenter will never find. The pasted eyes linger, not for their menace, but for their craft, how little it takes to tilt a tone, and the number hovers the way unfinished arithmetic does, inviting curious minds to carry it like a pebble in a pocket. He will not give it the promotion it wants. Pebbles belong to shoes, they teach a gait, not a sermon. In the drawer, where clippings live, he keeps 2 talismans that are not theatre. The teacher's sentence about hallways and switches, and the photograph of a chalked circle and cross drawn by a boy dressed as a surveyor, meaning distance and corners, not harm. He looks at them when the story's edges try to look bigger than the street. They shrink the picture to size. He is grateful for tools that do that. On a grey afternoon, he visits the morgue with no request in mind and finds himself standing at the long table, hands flat on felt, while the librarian tells him about a misfiled envelope from 1948 that resurfaced with patience intact. "Paper is better at waiting than we are," she says, and he nods, imagining the orange card doing its slow waiting under fluorescent weather. He hopes the waiting diminishes it. Some things deserve to be undramatic with time. He writes about other matters, zoning that will nudge a shadow across a block of kitchens, a ferry schedule that forgives working parents, a baker whose rolls taste like a secret shared fairly. In each, he practices the same posture the technicians taught by example: record the deviation without apology, center the bubble, refuse costumes. The work is smaller than fear wants it, deliberately. He keeps it that way because that is how living keeps its balance. When the rare call comes that tries to bait him back onto the stage, anonymous, breath performed, sentences shaved into slogans, he makes the answer uninteresting on purpose. We've printed what we can verify. The line has the nutritional value of a biscuit and the same quiet satisfaction. It fills the space hunger would like to occupy and asks for no applause. Late one evening, he stands by the green lamp and does the ceremonial nothing of not turning it on. The desk in darkness is not ominous, it is furniture at rest. He thinks of the cancel wheel that bites to the south, of the surveyor's benchmark that simply repeats here to anyone who asks, of the pressman humming off key while the city's morning stacked itself into vans. These are the systems he trusts. They do not send cards, they send arrivals. He leaves the building with his coat buttoned against a wind, trying out its winter voice. The bus at the corner displays its number with the old dignity of painted digits. A newsstand's last copies lean like houses in a polite storm. He passes a window where 3 pears ripen on a sill exactly as before, and decides their patience is the headline he will keep again. The orange card is a fact inside a box, loud once, and now mostly measured. What remains outside the box is the city's decision to go on doing ordinary brilliance. Mail moved, doors locked, children walked, words squared, jokes in bad taste retired by better ones. He chooses to write that down. At home, the door gives its familiar resistance and then yields, the chain answering with its little civic hymn. He opens his notebook to a clean page and writes the same line he wrote on the night the lamp stayed dark. Arrived, described, kept it smaller than it wanted to be. He adds one more sentence, new only in its certainty. The city kept itself larger. He closes the book. The radiator ticks. Outside, a siren chooses some other story. Inside, quiet performs no tricks, it just holds. The room settles. The desk lamp stays dark. Somewhere a radiator ticks like a small metronome, and the hallway keeps its own quiet. Tonight's card goes back to its box. The city keeps breathing. Before the file closes, this channel leaves a soft note for whoever is still awake. Add a pin to the night map, city and local time. If headphones are on, the clock can stay low. The comment can be louder. He'll read them all tomorrow with the morning light. If this kind of careful, true history horror helps the hours pass, the channel asks for 3 small things and then lets the room rest. Tap subscribe, let the bell know you prefer nights, and leave one request for a future case, year, place, and the detail that won't leave you alone. A final check of the door, the chain, the window latch. The tape returns to its sleeve, the notes return to their drawer. The story remains smaller than it wanted to be, the city remains larger. He thanks the listeners who stayed to the end. He wishes them an easy sleep and a steady morning. The sound bed thins to nothing, and the title card sets itself down like paper on a blotter. Good night.